Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. What a fantastic event for an innovation bureaucracy as I am, to be here with fellow innovators. Fantastic. And I think that everything that we heard, a slice of it always boils down to a city. And the city of Stockholm, as Jonas mentioned, we have a very tough target to be climate neutral or even climate positive within 6 years. And the generation before me, I worked in the cities in 1998, and the generation before me, they worked very hard on polluted water. So in the 1940s, the water wasn't possible to swim in the water in Stockholm. But today, you can swim right down beside the city hall, actually. You're not allowed because there's some boat traffic, but the water is okay. So I taken upon me and the generation that works now in the city, adding more layers to the city's development to work on climate neutrality. And we hope that we could be a role model to others, and we are very convinced that climate neutrality is possible to achieve. So this is a map of the region when it comes to innovation leaders. We've been talking a lot about innovation and how we have a huge impact when it comes to innovation in the Nordic countries, as well as Seattle and Washington. But this is a regional map, and if you know the location of Stockholm, you can see that we are actually an innovation leader within EU. So we have great potential, and we have a great innovation ecosystem to work with. And how do we do it? We are not a very, Jonas said we are a large city. We are just 1 million inhabitants and 2.5 million in the greater Stockholm region. But we're still a small city, so we need to work with others. We need to have a model that works for us, and we call it the triple helix. You probably heard of it. It is a collaboration between the public sector, the business sector, and the researchers and the universities, and it's very fruitful. And it doesn't mean that we have to copy each other. The researchers, they bring knowledge to the table, the business sector brings solutions to the table, and we as a city or the public sector, we can articulate our needs that can create a market or a business potential or a research object in the future. So this is the triple helix collaborations. And we have some different arenas for different types of collaborations. AI Sweden already been mentioned here. We work on AI, of course, but digital future is another important arena for innovation, where we work together in a partnership program with Royal Institute of Technology, Stockholm University, and RISE, the National Research Center. We talk a lot about innovation ecosystem, and this is just a slice of the tech innovation system. We always talk about double transformation or digital transformation for sustainable society. So I think to involve the whole tech system as well when it comes to climate issues is very important as well. This is a huge asset, this ecosystem, to the city of Stockholm, as well as the life science cluster. What really drives innovation are a crisis scenario, but it also a vision, a long-term vision of things being created in a different way. So we have a vision for the city in 2040. We have a commitment to implement the Agenda 2030 on the local level, but we also made a commitment to the EU to work with innovation and experimentation for others to follow. And the Commission also looked into our plans and our investment plans and kind of approved that if we follow them, we could actually achieve our goals. So we think that's very strong. And we also implement this vision in our annual budget. And just to show you what kind of target areas we're talking about, is a emission-free inner city, for example, and it also comes down to a climate budget that we have on emissions, for example. So how are we doing so far? Since the 1990s, we've been reducing the the emissions a lot. We are now down to 1.6 tons per citizens, but that is when we do the collective emissions calculations. When it comes to emissions from what we consume, like food and clothes and travels and so on, we have a lot more to do. I want to just showcase 2 examples on what we are doing right now. We work on a climate-neutral zone, a zero-emission zone downtown the city of Stockholm, 20 blocks, where you only are allowed to go in if you have a clean vehicle. And this is, of course, a very difficult systemic innovation approach, where we have to look into different aspects of innovation. I think it stopped? No? So these are a few issues that we need to handle with the systemic innovation demonstrator, coming down to business models, legislation, people need to change their behavior and so on. And last but not least, the way to become emission or positive. It is the carbon capture storage that we have in a company owned by the city or half owned by the city, working on to collect emissions from the district heating. So this is the plan. And now I'd like to welcome Markus on stage, because you have a great demonstrator as well in the city of Lund. Over to you, Markus.
Thank you. Thank you, Karin. Yes, it's great to be here, and it's such an opportunity. And as Jonas said, I'm energy strategist at the city of Lund, a city in the very south of Sweden. And it's it's mostly well known for its university. As just mentioned, it's the largest university in Scandinavia. So it has been the reason why we also are one of the most innovative regions of Europe. And together with Stockholm, we make one of the most innovative countries of the world. Because the university has been teaching thousands of students each year and also have a strong research position. And some of the most well-known innovations from here is the modern broadband. Maybe you use it. Maybe you have oat milk, that's also from Lund. And maybe you have heard about Bluetooth. Bluetooth is also an invention from Lund that you might have heard about. And actually the university is very big, and but we have for a long time invested in a very large-scale district heating system that supplies 90% of the heat demand of the whole city. And this is based on geothermal energy and biomass. And it became fossil-free in 2018, and which contributed largely to why Lund had been able to cut the emissions by 50% from 1990 to 2018, actually. But we're not satisfied there. Instead, you see here on the picture are 2 large-scale research facilities that are particle accelerators, where MAX4 is inaugurated 2019 and ESS is still being built. And when finished, these will provide 20% of the heating of the whole city. But we will distribute it in a new type of district heating grid we call low-temperature district heating or 4th-generation district heating, making use of waste heat to heat the city. So we say the science heats the city. It's a good slogan. But we are not only working with heating. We need electricity as well. And what we see now in the current situation is a strong decrease in production price of electricity from renewable sources. And this actually continues as more and more units are installed over the world. Solar, wind, batteries, the price decrease. And so in a very few years, in a very recent time, these energy sources will actually outcompete all other energy sources that have a fuel cost, because they don't have any running costs. They only have installation costs. So this will outcompete any other fuel source, any energy source, actually. Now, this is not our invention. This is something that you can read about. And you heard the batteries people just before here talking about this. But there is a big but. These are distributed energy sources, and the electricity grid we have today is a top-down. You need central production site and then distributed to the consumers. Whereas solar panels and wind is everywhere. So you need actually a new energy grid. And that's why I'm here, to talk about our new internetified grid that we talk about. We call it internetified because it's based on the same principle as internet. Building a distributed architecture from the beginning, making it possible to absorb distributed energy sources like solar. And you need three things for this to work. You need an energy protocol. Just as the internet uses an internet protocol to function, this needs an energy protocol. You need a energy routing that are digital controlled. That means that you can have full digital control of all the energy flows in these systems. And you also need independent cables between buildings. So this makes it possible to build local energy communities that can share electricity between themselves. And then when you connect a local energy grid with another local energy grid and so on, you get a grid of grids. And you might have heard of this system before. It's just like the internet. So this is what we are building at the moment. And by having this system of systems, you can actually create new digital marketplaces for the energy to actually sort of go besides the traditional energy market and create local markets where the local communities can benefit. So that's what we're doing at the moment, and you have to start somewhere. And we're starting here in these two buildings, connect them with new cables, with energy routers, and there are already PV panels on the roofs here, so we can share, put in batteries, and then we share energy between these buildings. You're very welcome to visit us. Thank you.
Thank you, Markus. Markus is representing Lund, City of Lund, and Karin from City of Stockholm. And both of these cities are part of a strategic innovation program in Sweden called Viable Cities. And this is actually inspired by the NASA's mission to go to the moon, has inspired this type of project as well, this program. And it's mission-oriented, and it's to create engagement across stakeholders to transform cities to climate neutrality by 2030. And in Sweden, 23 cities have signed this climate contract, and they sign it yearly. So this is one way of transforming cities by collaboration. And one of the things that I do think that these cities are inspired to do is to steal with pride from each other, because we don't have time to invent everything from the beginning. So now I'm hoping that we can maybe steal something from Seattle. And that's why I'm inviting Jessyn Farrell, Director of Office of Sustainability and Environment of City of Seattle, together with Markus Paulsson. You're welcome back to the panel as well, and Karin Ekdahl Wästberg as well. Thank you.
I was supposed to sit there.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's important, the order. Yes, that's good. So So glad that you are all here, and I hope that our discussion can contribute to accelerating the green transition of cities. And as we heard Jonas say, cities stand for 3% of the land on Earth, but contributes with 72% of the emissions. So it's kind of important. We have heard a bit about what is going on in Stockholm and Lund, but could you share a bit about what you are doing in Seattle, and what are the main challenges for you?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me join partners here today. And we are just always so inspired by our sister cities and partner cities in the Nordic countries. And so there is a lot that we like to steal happily from all of you. But I'd be happy to share a little bit about what we're doing. Under the leadership of Mayor Farrell, who has really made climate one of the key issues that his administration is addressing, we are really focusing our work into 3 areas right now. And again, I think the thing with climate is that we know exactly what we need to do at this point. So the things I'm going to say are probably not such a huge mystery. But, number 1, we have to decarbonize everything as quickly as we possibly can. And in Seattle, that is really around decarbonizing our buildings, and of course our transportation and waste. And so we recently enacted a building emissions performance standard, fondly known as BEPS, that regulates 4,000 of our largest buildings in the city, and works with building owners and operators to decarbonize fully by 2050. And in a hyperpolarized time, in a hyperpolarized city, we are really thrilled that we were able to get building owners, climate activists, and everyone in between to get on board with that. So we're really excited about that. The second thing we're doing is making sure we have an inclusive green workforce. So how do we make sure the benefits of this massive economic transition are felt widely across the city? So that's something that we're doing. And then, of course, we're facing the climate crisis already. And so we are working to build a climate resilient city. And that, in our work, is around our food systems. It's around our tree canopy. It's about building resilience hubs, so spaces that community members can gather in an emergency, or build resiliency across the year. So those are the 3 big bodies of work, and I'm excited to get to dig in a little bit.
Do you have any specific challenges? What is the hardest?
So I think there are 2 challenges. I mean, the obvious one is a political challenge, right? That while climate, I think in Seattle, is actually a consensus issue, local politics are really hard. How many people are familiar with the trees versus housing issue in the city of Seattle, right? And so, our contention is that a climate resilient city has abundant housing and abundant trees, but the policy making around that is actually really, really challenging. So that's one challenge. And then I think the other challenge that we wrestle with is we know what to do, and we, in many cases, actually know how to scale, and the pace that we need to go at is as fast as we possibly can sprint. And we take seriously a mindset of environmental justice, which really means centering those actions that are focusing on community members who've been harmed by racial and economic justice, both currently and in the past. And that really means working at the pace of trust, which is a really different timeline than decarbonizing as fast as you can. And so navigating that tension is something that we work on every single day.
And I think in that last aspect is something that we from Sweden can work more with a just transition. But it's also part of the viable cities. But I do think that we could steal with pride from here. Karin, I would like to know more about, we have heard it's important to work together with the industry. Are you doing that, or are you working also potentially with the academia?
Yes, we do both. And I think it's very beneficial to us to have like a 3-party collaboration, because it kind of neutralize some of the issues. When we do collaborations with the researchers, we often use the city's infrastructure. For instance, we have an innovation zone at the busiest city streets, calculating emissions, pollutions, and so on in real time, and it helps us with the decision making. We collect data and we get smarter, and we can see how many regulations and rules are, not being followed, and make adjustments when it comes to information or whatever. So we have a great collaboration. Right now, we're looking into, by the researchers on Royal Institute of Technology, on cognitive sensors, listening to the road traffic. So that's one example.
Thank you. I did some math on the calculation. You said you reduced emissions by 50%, but it took you 28 years, and you will be climate neutral by 2030. It's only 12 years left. How will that go?
Actually, yes, the baseline is from 1990, but our emissions didn't peak then. It peaked actually around 2010. So it took us 8 years to decrease the emissions by half, because it takes time to move. Before you make a decision, and then before you see the action, it takes time. So yes, I think it is possible to still reach our goals, but it will be tough.
And what are those challenges? Potentially you started with the easy things, so you might have some hard, difficult challenges left. What are the main challenges for you in Lund?
Since we've been working a lot with energy, and energy is like almost emission-free for us in Lund, having a large heating sector that provides heating for the citizens. When that is done, the second biggest, or the remaining big part, is traffic from the transportation sector. That stands for about 50% of the emissions today. So we do a lot of work with transportation and how to decrease traffic and also to switch fuels. We do both of that. And you should also know that even if traffic is the biggest, it is decreasing the amount of emissions. And you should also remember that from 1990 to 2020, the population increased with 45%, and we still decreased the emissions. So per capita emissions have decreased very much, actually. But we're still working on the traffic sector.
Yeah. But also the presentation you gave included the internetification of the grid. It sounds very interesting, but what would you say is your takeaway from that? What is it that is new and unique with the approach?
There has lots of implication, but I actually have 3 takeaways for you today. And the first one is that there is a lot of residual products, residual energy in the society today that you can use for heating. You don't need virgin energy for heating, actually. Most cities don't have particle accelerators, but maybe you have a factory or something else. That even a supermarket can have excess heat that you can utilize locally, share between buildings and so on. So it has been calculated that 40% of the energy in the EU is wasted as heat. And 40% of the energy in the EU is used for heating. So, for heating of buildings. So that is actually a perfect match. But we need the same locations at the same time. So that is one. There is a lot of energy that can be used. The second one is that this new grid architecture that we're suggesting is based on that it's possible to build new grid, that it's possible to build electricity cables between buildings. That has been legal in EU since 2 years, actually. And it's actually a consequence of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, when EU want to decrease Russian energy into Europe, and how can we work with other solutions? And one of the solutions is to start using local energy more. So this crisis has led to a shift in policy. making this possible. So I would love to see that Washington State would be the first state in the USA doing the same policy shift to make it possible to do this here as well.
Did you have a third one? Did you say
I have a third one.
Yeah.
May I? This energy protocol can be used to steer energy in grid, but it can also be used in other sectors. So if you're a property owner and you have a building management system, next time you change system or buy new parts to this, you should ask the supplier it should be compliant with the energy protocol. Because then you eventually will become vendor neutral. Because these suppliers usually lock in the customers. And by utilizing an open protocol like this, then you can become liberated from the suppliers and pick any supply, just as you can pick a Dell computer or a HP computer, and they can both communicate on the internet. You can do the same thing for building management systems, actually.
So Jessyn, now we heard a lot of different types of tests. Are you doing the same in Seattle? Are you working with pilots and tests? And can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, so we rely heavily on piloting, innovating, and use that as a model to then ultimately scale how we decarbonize. So one of the things that my office is focusing on especially is how do we create access to particularly electric vehicles in communities that may not have the wealth to just buy one outright. And so in particular, we're looking at drayage trucks. And so drayage trucks are those trucks that go between the port and a logistics facility. In Seattle, a lot of those drivers are immigrants and refugees. The current running price for a new electric drayage truck is around $500,000. So, and an old used diesel is about $40,000. So there's this huge price differential. And so we're working with a group of drayage truck drivers who are kind of independent owners or very, very small business owners, so maybe 20 trucks max. And we're really working with them to understand what kind of access to capital do they need, what barriers around charging, where would they actually charge the facility, if they're working for both the ports of Seattle and Tacoma, what does that look like, especially if there's kind of a city investment in that. So we're in a really preliminary stage to do this background work with this group of people because we need to be able to ultimately electrify the 4,000 drayage trucks in this region, and we suspect that those who are, part of companies that have just more capital are going to be able to do that, but these smaller owner-operators we're really interested in. So that's an example of a pilot, and we're working closely with the state of Washington and the ports of Seattle, particularly Seattle, because obviously we're the city, so we have an interest there, but the Port of Tacoma ultimately will be engaging, we hope, too. So that's an example of a pilot. And I can keep going if there are other ones you'd like to hear about, but that's one example.
So that's actually what I think we should do afterwards, so we can steal from each other. Karin, you talk a lot about creating conditions for an innovative market. What does that mean?
Yes, I think we have coming down to that the new innovations are a bit more expensive. You need to use all the tools that you have in your toolbox. And one great tool that we have in the city is public procurement. And we buy things for $4 billion yearly. And if we could use just a small amount of that money, aiming for new innovations, different things, that could be, the city could be the first customer of a startup or a scale-up or an innovative business. And I think we should use that tool even more. And for one example, we have a meatpacking district where we have a construction site with the demand on lower emissions. And the first electrified excavator in Sweden worked on that site from Volvo Construction Equipment, and they work for the company Skanska. And Skanska is now pitching the same model all over the world and creating a great market for an electrified excavator. And I believe the saying, you know, from the 17th century, that seeing is believing, but it's also the feelings that you see this excavator working and you enjoy that. It is a good working environment, and you do a lot of better planning with it, and you have to do some adjustments when it comes to the coffee breaks and you know, the lunch, because you need to charge it and so on. But things could be solved, and being open and transparent about it and working together with the city, we can procure in a way that, you know, the whole system leans a little bit forward and reach for what's not possible just yet, but could be possible. So we all kind of make the system move a little bit forward using procurement, for instance, and creating this innovative market.
And it's also a way of showing that solutions are already here. We don't need to wait. And so I think that's a good example as well. I was also very interesting, might be a bit selfish, as we have just signed an agreement, but can you provide examples on international collaboration that has been beneficial for Seattle? And do you see any potential opportunities going forward?
Yes, I would love to explore opportunities to collaborate, especially the internetification of the energy grid. That's really interesting. So we belong to many different networks of cities and regularly do exchanges to learn more. And I think a couple of ones recently that have really impacted our work, some of my office went to learn about resilience hubs in Barcelona. And so resilience hubs, of course, as I mentioned before, are these trusted community spaces where if there's a climate emergency, you know, you're able to access water or shelter, or throughout the year be able to access programming that, you know, creates interconnectedness or meets a particular community need. And in Barcelona, there were some just really interesting ways of doing shading. You know, the city of Seattle is increasingly going to be suffering from heat waves, so that's an example. And then Copenhagen, we really admire the way Copenhagen has, you know, had this tremendous mode shift from driving to walking, biking, and transit. And one of the things that we've learned is just how much they've leaned on piloting and experimenting and temporary street treatments and activation as a way to get community engaged, learn what works, what doesn't, before making permanent decisions. So those are just a couple of examples. And so we would love the opportunity to steal and to learn more.
Glad to hear that. I do think that we have some short time for questions as well. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yeah, in the back.
Hi, I'm Teresa from the University of Washington, and I was wondering if you could share more about any collaborations you do with the local universities. So just for myself, to get some ideas for how we can connect more with the city of Seattle.
That is a great question. So we use a lot of data to drive our programs, improve our programs. One of the innovative programs that came out of my office several years ago that is now a scaled program is what we call Fresh Bucks. And this is a $40 benefit that goes to low-income people in our community to have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And while we don't always pitch it in kind of an overtly like climate-forward way, obviously having a more plant-based diet is really important as part of our challenge around emissions. So we partner with some folks at UW, at the University of Washington, to actually help us with analysis of the program and measures of effectiveness. We have some of that within the office, but we really love to collaborate with the brainpower at the UW on that. We do other partnerships around data related to the greenhouse gas emission inventory that we do every 2 years. We have place-based collaborations in the Duwamish Valley related to cleanup and kind of building a resilient community in South Park and Georgetown. So there are a number of ways that we collaborate with the UW, and we're always open to other opportunities.
We have a question in the front.
Thanks. Hello. Thank you. I was wondering about Lund and its hyper-aggressive carbon neutral by 2030 ambitious goal. May you achieve it. Is there something unique about Lund that allows you to have that stance and potential, or can anyone do it?
Actually, it's 100 cities in Europe that has signed a contract with the European Commission that they will become climate neutral by 2030. So we are not the only one, but I think we are quite advanced in many ways, but it will be difficult for us to reach that goal. Yeah.
Something unique about Lund that allows that, or is it just you decide to do it, it's going to happen?
We've had actually strong political leadership for a long time that we should be advanced in environment. For instance, the council has 4 overarching goals, where one is climate neutrality, the other one is budget in balance, and so on. So it is really a strong leadership from the politicians there.
Karin, do you want to add? I mean, with the European Mission label, it's actually reviewed the plan that you have as well to become the climate neutral city in 2030.
Well, it's great to have some experts from the EU actually looking into your plans, especially when they approve, that our investments and the plans helps us reach our goals. So it's always important to have like a third party looking into your strategies, the kind of critical friends that you need. So I think that was great, and it helps us a lot and mobilize around it. And we have a climate city contract, and as you mentioned, we have an annual. We look into that annually, and we have several partners signing up on that contract, and they align with our goals. And if you have a partner like, for instance, Skanska, working with a sustainability idea and aligning with our goals as well, that's very powerful. So it helps us a lot, this mission label, the climate city contract, and of course the ambitious goals. And they kind of appreciate that we are a demanding customer, and you don't hear that all the time.
So who is signing this contract?
It is the mayor of Stockholm.
Yep. And it's done publicly?
Yes.
To be binding?
Yes, it's a great commitment. Yeah? Yes, very public.
Okay. You decide, Begga. It says time's up, so I'm not in charge anymore.
You all are in municipalities and you deal with businesses, politicians. How do you deal with individual citizens who have resistance and think maybe I can't even make one small change? How do you deal with citizens who are more obstinate or frustrated?
Who wants to start?
That is a great question, because you kind of need to push and pull. But I think when it comes to, for instance, public transport, it's such a great example. If you have a public transport system that is clean, it's safe, and it operates on time most of the time, then it's a great option instead of using your car, because you have to pay for parking fees and standing in queues and taking time and so on. So if you are good enough, it's going to be an option to the citizens, and you always need to work together, because I don't think that a zone that wasn't accepted by the business sector or the restaurants and so on in the city center, it wouldn't have been possible to implement that. So the zero emissions zone is also a dialogue, and we are all very thrilled on what's going to happen January the 1st when the zone is implemented. So it's a huge experiment, and we're doing it together. And of course, it's not friction-free, but we share the same goal. I think many of us in the city of Stockholm share the same goals and values and ideas. But that is a very important question.
I really appreciate how you are talking about Stockholm sharing the same values. I think sometimes, particularly in this local and American political climate, it's sometimes hard to see that. But I do think, again, on climate, that is an issue in Seattle where the vast majority of people are aligned and want to do something. And I think, one, we also think about, using incentives and making the thing that we're asking people to do something that's enjoyable. Like, we're looking at FIFA when, 66% of the world is going to be watching the World Cup in Seattle. So how do we make it a wonderful experience to leave your car at home and get to the city? And we can look at our friends at the Kraken who have embedded a transit ticket into the ticket that you buy so that it's just easy. And how did they know how to do that? They actually interviewed fans and participants to kind of understand, like, what is it going to take to get you to take transit to get to the stadium? And one of them was just like convenience, just throw it in there so I don't have to worry about it, right? So like kind of understanding the market is one of the pieces to it. And then I also think that, meeting people where they are. The climate crisis is really upon us. The smoke and wildfire season is a real thing in this part of the world now. And, but that's an opportunity then to get heat pumps into people's homes. We are then cooling and creating safe air to breathe, right? So there are these kind of leverage moments that we're really thinking about. How do we then take that and get the things that we're hoping people will do to change?
Yeah, I think you should keep it short.
Yes.
So.
We're all individuals, but we're also so stuck in a system. So we need to work both. We both have individual choices of what we can do. Every time you spend $1, what do you buy? What impact does it have? So the richer you are, the more impact you have. But at the same time, we all live in a society where we are locked into how we live. So how can we as a society move forward and do better and transition towards a better future? So it is difficult and it interacts, but it's important that we as cities work to improve the system so that citizens can do good choices.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.